So on today's episode, you're going to learn about why it is so important to understand critical metrics and numbers and why there are no silver bullets at all. It's a great episode you do not want to miss, so do stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2X eCommerce podcast. I'm your host, Kunle Campbell, and this is the podcast dedicated to rapid growth in the direct-to-consumer selling space. So if you work in marketing at an e-commerce business or a founder, I'm going to help you sell more directly to your customers. Each week on this podcast, I interview an expert, a founder of a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business, or a representative from a best-in-class e-commerce SaaS product. We're focused in helping you improve e-commerce growth metrics such as your conversions, your average order value, your repeat customers, your audience size, and ultimately sales. Our remit is to help you sell more sustainably. So welcome to the 2X e-commerce podcast. Now, the episode you're about to listen to is an episode I had with Garret Akerson. He is a phenomenal entrepreneur. I personally learned a lot from this episode. He runs a 30 million plus maternity brand alongside his wife. It's called Kindred Bravely. What's quite interesting is, many years ago, I think it was about 5 or so years ago, he started it off with his wife selling on Amazon. They had a few SKUs, and they gradually started to move it direct to consumer. Right now, the makeup of their business is more D2C than Amazon. Amazon is, I think, about 20% of their entire business, while their D2C operations are about 80%. But here's why you should listen to this episode if this is of interest to you. He talked about how they almost lost the business, how they were making money, but they were not making money in the sense that there were sales coming, but they were not really seeing profit. And so he had to go down to the fundamentals. He went for like an MBA course, not a proper MBA, like a 4-day weekend type MBA, which he mentions in this conversation generally about where he went. I'll share all the details of exactly where he went. And the number one thing he realized off the back of that when they're asking him and throwing questions at him was like he couldn't really come up with his numbers. So from there, he started to come up with key metrics. He put together key metrics, and individuals that were leaders in specific strategic departments of the organization kept filling the metrics dashboard up. Simple Excel, Google Sheets, Excel, metrics. And they're able to understand the ebbs and the flows of their business. They have a rhythm. And even with the iOS changes now with Facebook, with iOS essentially, ruining all the data on most advertisers' dashboards on Facebook, they're still able to use their dashboard to determine how much to spend on Facebook, which I found really, really interesting. He's a clever, intelligent guy. I spent over 40 minutes speaking with him. There's so much to take from here. We talk about RFM analysis, CLV. You get into the head of a fast growth company, the leader of an e-commerce business generating over $30 million in revenue. What more can you ask for? So grab your notes, listen tight, because I actually break down my interview into how was your first million? How was your first 10 million? How does your first 10 million differ from where you are now? What should you focus on if you're under 10 million, and what should you focus on what are you focusing in now that you're 30 million? So there's a ton of just advice and insights on how to structure your team. The things he did earlier, like hiring specialists at the start of his journey, D2C, and that really worked. So Kindred Bravely is interesting as a case study, as a growth story. And, I implore you to listen to this episode if this kind of growth stories actually inspire you to grow yourself. And if you think this episode would be of use to any other colleague of yours, any friend, family member, forward it on, please. That's the best you can do. Just share information like this with other people you think will benefit off the back of it. Other than that, expect to hear from our sponsors shortly. Enjoy this episode, and I shall catch you on the other side. Thank you for listening. Cheers. Hey Garret, welcome to the 2X eCommerce podcast. It's a pleasure having you on.
Kunle, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Could you let's get back. Let's get a backstory. So who is Garret? And how did you what was life like before Kindred Bravery? Let's start from there.
Yeah, so prior to Kindred Bravely, I was running a digital design and development company
Hmm.
and really just focused on Drupal development and website design and digital advertising for clients uh, on the B2B side. So I had the opportunity to work with amazing clients and see what they were doing. And
Hmm.
I think if any one of your listeners has been on the, consulting or agency side before, they probably know what it's like to look at all these cool companies and think, man, I could do that, or that would be fun to do that. And so that bug finally hit, and that was part of the impetus for starting Kinder Bravely with my wife.
Okay, so you're a maternity and breastfeeding apparel brand. Did you have a baby? Did that inspire you, a new member of the family? Was there any life changing triggers?
Yes. So we have two boys,
Okay.
and my wife was breastfeeding our youngest at the time,
Hmm.
and she simply could not find anything comfortable to wear. And it was she had wanted a pair of breastfeeding pajamas, and she didn't get anything for Christmas, no fault of my own. And then her birthday is in January, and January came around, she didn't get anything for her birthday. Again, that probably was my fault, but I said, "Hey, I'll take you shopping." So we went to all the local retailers and came up empty-handed. And at the time, like I said, I kind of had this bug to start something new, was looking at uh, different ideas in the D2C space. And she said, "Well, what about maternity and breastfeeding? I know what I want. I can't find it. Certainly, there has to be other moms out there with the same feeling and the same need." And so that was the spark that started Kinder Bravely, and that's a little over 6 years ago. Yeah, in
Well,
2015.
well. Okay. So how many skis did you start off with?
We started off with one SKU. It was a pair of black pajamas in four sizes.
Okay.
So that would be four SKUs, if I'm not
Wow.
mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the feedback loop? What gave you courage to continue? How did you go to market with those, four SKUs with the pajama set?
So we launched in May of 2015,
Hmm.
and we launched simultaneously on Shopify and Amazon.com.
Okay.
It was slow going in the beginning. In fact, that first order was 250 units, so not a lot of units. Actually, I take that back. It was 400 units, I believe, and we probably gave away, Kunle, we probably gave away 250 of those,
Okay.
just to like anyone that would take them to get the word out there. Like, hey, these are amazing. Go leave a review online for us. And primarily focused on Amazon in the beginning. In fact, entirely. We had a few sales trickle in through Shopify, but our main focus was Amazon, getting reviews on Amazon. At the time, a soft lines and clothing was still fairly nascent on Amazon. It wasn't something they had pushed into a lot. That being said, it was still a huge business, and there was
Hmm.
a lot of search intent there,
Hmm.
but they weren't who they are today, where now I think they're the largest clothing retailer, larger than the last three combined,
Hmm.
or something like that. But
Hmm.
so we really focused on reviews and product. That first product it did okay. It had great reviews. Um, it didn't sell incredibly well over the summer. It did all of a sudden pick up come November, December. We hadn't realized at the time, okay, not many people probably buy pajamas in the summer, but plenty buy them come fall and winter and gift them.
Hmm.
But then in November, we launched two nursing bras.
Hmm.
So that was really when we saw the first like inclination of, wow, this could be something. Um, this is doing really well. And again, totally from need.
Hmm.
Deanne, my wife at the time, hated anything elastic
Hmm.
around her rib cage because it was just uncomfortable and tight, and your rib cage is changing
Hmm.
throughout pregnancy and afterwards. And so those first two bras were elastic free, they were really comfortable, and they just really resonated with the market. And that was all it took. Those three products, two bras and a pair of pajamas by the end of the first year. And we were confident enough to, I was confident enough to leave my prior position and job at the beginning of 2016, in January of 2016.
Incredible, incredible. So first set of SKUs May. Fast forward 5-6 months after you released the bras, the traction from there, gave you sufficient confidence, to just focus full time. Was all of this on Amazon, or was this D2C or a blend?
It was still 98% Amazon
Okay.
come January of 2016. It wasn't really until, I would say, November, December of 2017 that we really started pushing into our own store sales on Shopify.
Okay, and then how has the business sort of evolved now? I mean, revenues now are 30 million as at 2020, I believe, and so what is the makeup now? Do you still sell on Amazon? What's the breakdown?
Yeah, we do still sell on Amazon. It's not the majority of our sales anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's, in the ranges anywhere from probably 25 to 30% of our sales. So still a, a meaningful amount, but no, the majority of our sales now are through our own site, through kindredbravely.com.
Very, very interesting. So how did you wean yourself, from November 2017, which is not too long ago in the grand scheme of things, to from, pretty much 2% Shopify or 2% D2C to 75% D2C, if I'm not mistaken, because there might be other channels you might be tapping into.
Yeah, no, that's quite accurate. I think, other channels are maybe contribute 2% of our current revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And how? So the how, that'll probably take longer than a podcast, but I'd say in 2017, we made some strategic hires. So I think first it starts with the team. And we knew, at least I did, coming from a agency background, that I didn't want generalists. So we hired really just some phenomenal team members that were specialists in their area. So we hired 4 team members all at once. We hired a Instagram manager, a Pinterest manager, a Facebook manager, and an email manager,
Yeah.
all in April of 2017.
Wow. Okay.
And just started pushing content on those channels. I think we knew if we were going to do paid social, the base of it is great content. And so we backed all of that content with paid, starting probably about the same time, April, May of 2017. That year, we won the Shopify Build a Bigger Business competition as one of the 8
Oh.
fastest growing retailers on their platform.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly luck because we just hadn't pushed many, or timing, I should say. We hadn't pushed many sales on Shopify.
Mm-hmm.
We hired that team. And come to think of it, I think they started in March and we probably really started pushing spend in April.
Mm-hmm.
And the contest happened to be February through like June of that year.
Mm-hmm.
So we went from like a trickle of orders to, we were probably doing $60,000, $70,000 a month by the end on Shopify,
Mm-hmm.
in 4 or 5 short months.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it was really just team, content, and paid social.
Incredible, incredible. And this is the first time I'm hearing, a brand, a startup brand that is, hiring a Pinterest, manager, organic Pinterest manager to just manage that channel. And obviously there is a match right there from, the Pinterest audience and the product. There's just that fit, an audience, product fit, or audience brand fit. So what does the mix look like? Has this evolved now in 2021 in the D2C space? Where you activating awareness and first time customers for Kindred Bravely?
Yeah, it has shifted. I don't know that it has shifted much. It's certainly shifted. Uh, Most of our customer acquisition is still, well, and not by much, most is a loose term, but primarily through paid social.
Mm-hmm.
But it has shifted in that it's primarily Instagram. I would say that's our main channel
Mm-hmm.
at this point where customers are, but it's still closely followed by Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, we do work with quite a few influencers now
Mm-hmm.
and affiliates, and then we do a little bit on the podcast sponsor podcasts that are in the mom space,
Mm-hmm.
and but new customer acquisition, it's still primarily paid social. We've been dabbling in TikTok and seeing some initial results there that look promising.
Mm-hmm.
And paid search, again, paid search is in there as well. I don't think there's any one thing. I think there's these two kind of warring things as a brand or brand owner. One, trying to cross all bridges at once. I think there's that famous Sun Tzu quote, like, he who crosses all bridges at once or tries to cross all bridges at once dies on all bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we were very intentional in which ones we picked to cross first, but still at the same time, we're doing paid search, we're doing paid social, we're doing content. We just layered them in through the years as we had bandwidth and resources, not all in, God forbid, all in one year.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So you talked about, or we talked about, back in 2018, there was a very tumultuous period, for, Kindred Bravery, because you'd never experienced it before. And it was, for the first time, your team experiencing on profitability, over an extended period of time. Could you just explain, the genesis to the event and the event itself, and how you sort of managed to overcome it, and to where you are now?
Yeah. I think it's ironic that or at least a little bit, in 2018, we won the Inc. 5000, or not one, but we were on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing privately held companies. We were number 20, I think.
Hmm.
And it's kind of a vanity metric because it's looking at top line
Yeah.
revenue, which is fun to look at.
Hmm.
But we had 5 months in a row where we lost money, and we were bootstrapped.
Hmm.
We'd been bootstrapped all the way until this year, and it was rough, and had just a number of issues that led to us losing money in consecutive months. Uh, Probably chief among them was just advertising costs out of control and out of whack,
Okay.
and softer than expected sales. So we ended up, you get in this, I think, position, or can, as a retailer, where you're holding too much inventory, so all your cash is tied up in inventory,
Hmm.
and your advertising is not performing as needed or as expected.
Hmm.
And particularly if you're reliant on paid social like we were at the time, or heavily reliant. And so we had a certain amount of overhead costs, and then we just didn't know our numbers, like, um, what we needed to make a month as far as fixed costs to support, or as far as revenue to support fixed costs.
Hmm.
And even basic things like, okay, what our average order value is to what our customer acquisition cost is, and what that needs to be. Like,
Hmm.
I don't think it was probably even until 2019 that we really got a handle on all our metrics. And it really forced us to, at the time, is um, we had a number of, so there were a couple of things. We had a lot of overhead just from SaaS software. So we implemented NetSuite that year,
Right.
huge
Okay.
cost.
Hmm.
We moved to our own warehouse, again, a huge cost.
Hmm.
had too much inventory. We made some just bad bets. Like at the time, I think when you're worried and things aren't working, we made some bets on print. I think we spent $20,000 on a print catalog, and it
Mm,
produced like $500 in sales. Uh, and not to say print doesn't work.
mm,
Obviously, I know some e-commerce owners that works quite well.
mm,
We did a crowdfunding, a Kickstarter campaign where we spent like $60,000 on a Kickstarter campaign that didn't go anywhere.
mm.
Um, and in hindsight was for a new product, and what we really needed to move was existing products. So double kind of whammy there.
Right.
Um,
So
so yeah,
lots
I
of
think
lots of so it was a accumulation of bad decisions, which translated in huge overheads, and
mhm.
there was no visibility on a North Star metric, no metrics to guide you. Would you say you didn't even have metrics operationally? So from a cost of goods standpoint, or was the back end sorted, and just more your front end initiatives, your customer facing initiatives that really had the issues? And when did you realize that okay, this was the issue? When was the diagnosis actually revealed to you, and who revealed it for you?
Yeah, good questions. So it was both the back end and the front end. I think, at least for me, it we had an accounting staff. They did provide numbers,
Hmm.
but without somebody to be able to, or you being the one to look at the relationship of those numbers and say, okay, if our customer acquisition cost is $45 and our average order value is $75, there's not a lot of room there um, to support overhead or to support any mistakes, because you're not even factoring in cost of goods or anything else. So
Yeah.
um, I think it wasn't so much that the numbers weren't there. I think in today's world, they're always there. They hopefully they're pretty easily accessible. It's really understanding them and the interrelationship between them, and knowing what the numbers have to be for it to work for your business, because
Yeah.
it's a little bit different for everyone. So at the time, I think a couple of things we did, we were using SaaS software to like aggregate and give us a dashboard and all this stuff.
Hmm.
It was kind of fancy, but it was always half broken. So you would have to look different places for the numbers or they wouldn't be accurate. Um, it all culminated in September of 2018 when we went to a business conference by Keith Cunningham. It was a 4-day MBA in Austin, and like went through all the numbers and how they were all interrelated. That was a real eye opener, and certainly the turning point of like, okay, this is what the ratios look like for us. Here's how much we need to make to cover overhead. Um, and simple things like, why are we spending money on a Kickstarter for a new product when we've got too much existing inventory we've got to move through?
Mm.
Um, so I think that was the big eye opener in September, early October. We made a couple key decisions that worked. We were using a couple of freelance consultants to manage our paid spend on Facebook,
Hmm.
and we switched to an agency. We vetted a few agencies. We knew an agency that just worked in D2C, and we made that switch in
Hmm.
October,
Hmm.
and it worked because that November we were back to profitable. I never thought, we'd be one of those companies that was in the black on Black Friday, but we were, thankfully. And it was, yeah, one, getting those advertising metrics back in order, really
Hmm.
just getting our customer acquisition costs down. But the big thing for us also at the time was just scaling new customers because we had plenty of inventory. So we were able to do both. Our CAC came way down, and we were able to scale spend up quite a bit
Mm, So
and
the
move through
right
current
people,
inventory.
the right people, and what speaks to me here is, Keith Cunningham, the 4D MBA. Actually checked out his website. Not heard of him before, and it looks to me like that was very strategic. So that was like at a business level. It was not necessarily, tactics. It was like, know your numbers. Let's understand your numbers. So you got a good hold of your numbers, and then you sort of, looked to who could, change your numbers around, and that's where you got that agency to really help you bring down the CAC. And then with existing customers, were you now selling more to them? Like, did you start to activate them via like re-engage them rather via like email campaigns? How did that how were you sort of maximizing CLV, especially given the fact that women only breastfeed for a specific number of years? Obviously, most people decide to have kids, back on back, and so that helps. That really helps. But how did you sort of understand customer behavior on the one hand, and maximize CLV to really put you in the black?
Yeah, so certainly that conference, coming out of that, one thing we did was throw away our automated dashboard because it just like we could never get it to work perfectly and nobody had true ownership on the team.
Mm,
So really as a founder and owner owning that and then having team members own it, which was the big change. And we just resorted to an Excel sheet of metrics that we eventually, turned into a Google sheet that had our metrics for advertising and sales and here we are in 2021 and we rely on that same sheet. We haven't automated it. It's still pretty basic, but it works because everyone puts in their own numbers. They know their numbers. We as a team know our numbers and what they mean. So I think that was one of the big key things out of that. And then,
okay.
like you said, making those differences, driving customer acquisition costs down. For us, it wasn't so much activating prior customers. Being in the maternity and breastfeeding space, Kunle, you alluded to, it's not a long lifetime.
Mm,
Like customer lifetime, other D2C brands. I know the grass is always greener on the other side as a D2C, brand owner. You're like, oh, it would be nice to have that audience or this audience. But we did not focus on LTV. We still don't to this day. Instead, what we did was realize we should focus on AOV
mm.
because for us, a mother breastfeeds for 6 months. So you had mentioned years, not really years.
Wow.
Um, so
Well,
it,
in the UK, it's slightly, yeah, it's slightly longer. So yeah, it's like, I'll just say it's slightly longer. My missus was she was in she was a few years ago. She was trying to breastfeed our baby at the doctor's, and then an elderly woman comes to her and is like, no, 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 no. And then somebody passes, and then she covers herself, right? And she just tries to tidy us and straighten herself up because it's in public, you never can tell. And then an elderly lady comes and says, no, 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 continue, continue. I've breastfed my children till 5, and I have 2 doctors, a lawyer, blah blah. So culturally, it's like totally different. Most people do it for years here. So I
yeah.
beg you. Sorry, I
Well,
digress.
no, that's great. I think stats in the US are it's like right around 50% of mothers are still breastfeeding at 6 months,
Wow.
and then it's less than a third are still breastfeeding at 12 months. So
Wow.
there are still, there's still a third of moms breastfeeding at 12 months,
Mm.
but it's a third.
So do you catch them prenatal at pregnancy? So almost like prepping them up so that they get their gear more or less to be mothers, or do you get them just shortly after birth after they have tried the rubbish in the market and frustrated with the elastic options, and then you have a much more comfortable solution to them?
We do. We didn't realize it at the time, certainly not in 2018, but typically she's in the market in like her second or third trimester.
Right.
So shopping fairly early, or I guess what I would consider early. Maybe it's not, but for a breastfeeding brand, we thought maybe it was later,
Mm.
and it is earlier than we thought.
Wow. Well,
Yeah,
that's interesting. That's interesting.
yeah,
So AOV is was your North Star, and that really it probably still is. I really like what you talked about in regards to team members owning their metric on your Google Sheet, on your central, Google Sheet. So to this day, do you not use, APIs to feed the data, and or do people just individually enter their numbers on a daily basis, weekly basis? How does the dashboard work?
yeah. So we're well north of 30 million, and team members still enter their numbers every week. They have to be entered by Monday so that management can view them. And you have to comment on the numbers, like why was it above or below, or any extenuating circumstances. So not we want you to understand your numbers, not just
Mm,
have an API, plug them in and no one look at them. So if your number is under where expected, it's like, hey, we're under this week because of this, or hey, we're over because we ran this campaign. And we can look back now at history now, all the way back to October of 2018,
mm,
and see all those metrics as well as notes like, oh, we did this here, or we ran this sale here. Um, it's at this point it's invaluable. Whereas I
yeah.
think even finding a dashboard where you can mark it up, let alone have it be still functioning and the whole team using it,
Mhm.
3+ years later, I would think pretty rare. I haven't met anybody else.
Impressive, yeah. Discipline
Yeah,
and accountability, really,
yeah,
at that level, to every, every iota, every bit of the company. That's super, super interesting. Okay, so um, when you were, what would you say AOV has always been your, your North Star metric, from a market, well, from an customer optimization standpoint? Or did that change? So prior to say 10 million, what were you looking at? Was it still AOV, or have things changed over time in terms of like the key metrics that determine growth at Kindred Bravely? Sorry.
it changed over time. AOV is still our North Star. I had listened to a great episode on why brands should use RFM, recency, frequency, monetary value, versus
Mm-hmm.
LTV, because we're not SaaS companies. Therefore, LTV doesn't apply. Everybody still seems to use LTV,
Mm-hmm.
but realizing that, our customer probably is not going to be with us that long, and it's really rewarding as a brand, 6+ years in now, to see moms coming back, customers coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But still, we're not a high lifetime value company. I just, by the very nature of our customer, I don't think that's probably ever going to be the case. So for us, focusing on AOV, which is the metric that you would have to follow to make it all work, because you're spending to acquire a new customer all the time. So our two main metrics on that front are CAC, what are we paying to acquire a customer, and AOV. And if that metric is off, you're sunk. It's just not going to work. Like, it's it's simple math. You're not going to work as a business if the margin between your CAC and your AOV aren't supporting, your cost, your COGS, your cost of goods,
Yep.
any of your fixed overhead, the team, and all those other costs.
So with inflation over the years and the fact that you're managing your data, have you seen your AOV sort of creeple up? Obviously, AOV should be engineered. It should be encouraged to be engineered. But has AOV grown as you have grown? As a business. I mean, you were 10 million in 2018. You're 30 million plus now in 2021. Is AOV still the same?
No, AOV is very different. The business looks very different than it did. Early on, AOV you asked earlier, has it always been AOV? It wasn't. I don't think we paid too much. I mean, we knew what AOV was, but it certainly wasn't like the guiding metric. We certainly track quite a few more metrics than that, but as a brand, we're well aware of like, okay, what our AOV needs to be compared to our CAC. And we were very intentional about increasing AOV. So we hired our first dedicated Shopify e-commerce manager in, I think it was 2018 or 19, might have been 19. And, that was the one metric we gave her when she started. Said like AOV is here, by the end of the year, we want to see it here. So you can do a ton to push up AOV. And I think as a D2C, as a brand owner, you definitely should. Like,
what did she do to what were a few things she did
so
to
yeah, big initiatives for us right from the get-go were how can we better do in-cart upsells? So your Ajax cart slide outs, how
Mhm.
can you add or suggest another item there? How can you show your X dollars away from free shipping? So free shipping thresholds can push up AOV.
Mhm.
So you can change your shipping thresholds or test different shipping thresholds. Um, and bundling can also be quite effective because you can offer more value but yet drive a higher AOV. So whereas if you're just doing 20% off, and somebody's purchasing on average, 1.5 units, you may not be hitting that AOV with the 20% off, but you may be able to offer 25% off on a bundle but push a higher AOV.
Mhm. Okay.
So I think the three big ones for me for D2C brands when you're thinking about your AOV, merchandising better, so frequently bought together on the
Yeah.
PDP page, product detail pages, um, and then bundling on also on the category pages, offering bundles through email as well, but certainly even on category pages, showcasing bundles or on the homepage.
Mhm.
And then in cart, anything you can do in cart to show, you're close to the shipping threshold, and or insert suggested items that get you over the shipping threshold or that, go well together. Simple things too. We originally thought, well, if you add a bra to your cart, we should show you underwear or we should show you pajamas. But it, and I would think it's probably similar for other e-commerce owners. I'd love to know, it'd be fun to test. Certainly in the clothing space, if you buy one item, you're actually, in our experience, most likely to buy a second one of that same item, but in
Mhm.
a different color. So, if you bought a bra in black, why don't you just suggest one in beige
Mhm.
or pink? And so just one, being diligent about your testing, and being very intentional about pushing up AOV and
Mhm.
what you can do to push it up.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And then, what about other metrics? Other key metrics. Were you looking? They're obviously on-site metrics, and performance marketing metrics. So what other three metrics were you using to really navigate through the wave of growth?
We always look at advertising as a percentage of sales, and we'll look at it by channel. So Facebook spend as a percentage of Shopify sales. That's probably our second biggest one. We know what the range should be. Facebook spend as a percentage of Shopify sales, and if it gets too far above that range, we need to dial spend back. It's not efficient. And again, it's going to eat into that margin
Mm-hmm.
where we can't afford to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we look at Facebook ROAS, but really that's from a management standpoint, and it's not the signal it once was post iOS 14.5. We still look at it, but it's significantly lower. in
Yeah.
reporting than it was prior. So I think post iOS 14.5, we depend more on looking at Facebook spend as a percentage of Shopify sales versus historicals, and then what we're spending on that cost per purchase.
Do you work with
Versus we
influencers?
know our AOV. Mm-hmm.
Do you work with influencers?
Oh, yeah. We work with quite a few influencers as well. So we'll track influencer spend. So again, that goes back to team members entering their own metrics. So the team that manages influencers, they'll put in influencer gross sales for the week, how much we spent on influencer spend that week, and then you can calculate right there your return on ad spend. It's not technically ad spend, but return on influencer spend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Right. So you did mention very briefly the fact that you just had external investment into the brand Kindred Bravely. Um, what I would like to think. So, question is, did you really need it, or was it strategic?
It was strategic. Yeah. So we have been bootstrapped and profitable from day one, other than, like I said, 2018 was a tough year. We had 5 negative months. I think that always, as a founder, probably sits in the back of your head. Like, what if things don't turn out like I expected, or what if the macro environment shifts so much that, we're unprofitable, or we cannot continue to grow. Uh, and we found an amazing strategic partner that that we did take an outside investment from in 2021 to really fuel and grow the brand for this next stage.
Do they bring know-how or finance or both?
Certainly both. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So it's very
Yeah.
strategic, very, very strategic.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's probably more the norm than not nowadays.
Right.
If you're looking at PE firms, most the environment is so competitive overall, Kunle, that if they didn't bring, strategic help as well, it's probably not money well spent on their end. I think a lot just aren't willing to, right? If they're going to invest
Yeah.
that much money, they really want to ensure that you're going to be successful.
Absolutely. Especially in the PE front, the risk aversion is airtight. So they must have done their diligence, and really been happy with your numbers to put in. So that means you've given a bit of equity for them to be on your board, I would think.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about your team. One thing that stuck with me was the fact that you had, at least at the time of reading this bio, there were you have a distributed team, lots of remote workers. Has this always been the case? Is this still the case? And how do you manage?
It is. I think it's another one of our core strengths.
Mm.
Being distributed, one, and two, we just have an amazing team. I think it allows us to recruit just top talent, and we've always been location independent. So prior to COVID, it was odd to have, Zoom interviews and a remote team. We were certainly in the minority. And then along comes COVID, and it was the new norm for a lot of people. And I
Mm.
think it took an adjustment for a lot of teams,
Mm.
whereas for us, it was really, there was no change. It was, hey, this is how we've always functioned. We've always been remote. So we have about 60 team members all across the US, Canada, Ukraine, Philippines. And yeah,
How
we
do you get
function.
everybody together? You have 60 team members distributed. Do you ever have any retreats? Do you come together, specific times of the year, once a year, or do people meet up on the West Coast, or are you always distributed? Are you always remote?
I think it's important to get FaceTime and really get that team, um, just team camaraderie, buy-in, cohesion.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly there's a place for in-person events. we have historically done an all team in-person event at least once a year. So everyone gets together. And that is much more just team building, team bonding, working together, having fun together. And it's been really productive doing that. It's fun to see people, IRL, and in real life. There's some people, like, I have not met a number of team members in real life still, particularly with COVID right now. And so yeah, looking forward to that. We do, typically twice annual manager meetings in person as well, but that's not a lot. It's usually 2 to 3 meetings a year, and the rest of the time it's Zoom and Slack.
Okay, makes sense. I can imagine your Slack, your company Slack. You probably have, sub Slacks. I can imagine. I can just imagine what your Slack looks like. Curveball question. You're a co-founder with your wife. Some listeners are thinking about, running a business with their partners. Do you have any tips?
Tips.
Yes, tips, and running a business with your life partner, with your missus.
Yes. Have a very good counselor, therapist for the two of you. It was all the trend in Silicon Valley to have a startup therapist or founder therapist. So just treat it as that. You're gonna need a third party arbitrator sometimes, or just somebody that's, it's their job to facilitate tough conversations
On a weekly basis.
No, we certainly didn't do weekly. Probably every 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
I think that and one you like and that works well. 2, just make sure you have a solid base to fall back on, like something else. 3, I would say, be easy on yourself and realize that you're probably going to talk about work all the time.
Fair enough. And the children just sock it in. Do the children pull up metrics sometimes with your kids? And you're like, where did you get that from?
Yeah, for us it was a double whammy because we had young kids and a young company and the stresses of running a young company. I would do it again, certainly. We still have a great relationship. At the same time, it's a relief. It'd be a relief to probably do new projects as well. The other thing, I think one of the just hacks that was probably the most helpful from our therapist was for us to set do not work time.
Right.
Because we had tried forever to be like, oh, we're not going to talk about work. We're not going to work. The reality is, if you're in a startup, you're working 60-hour weeks probably. We put the kids to bed and work till midnight.
Yeah.
And so we just posted on the home office door, do not work hours. It was so much easier because it just gives yourself permission to talk about work. Otherwise, you're like, I don't really want to talk about work. Can I talk about work? Or I'd say that was, for me, probably the biggest hack that was the most beneficial.
Thank you for the insights. I really appreciate that. Garret, I didn't know the conversation was going to pan out this way. I have thoroughly enjoyed this call. But before I let you go, we have it's an evergreen rapid fire question session. I'm going to ask you 5 to 6 questions. If you use a single sentence to answer these questions, we're A-okay. Are you a morning person?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a daily morning routine?
I do. I wake up, meditate, hit the gym. Sometimes it's reversed, and take a cold shower for at least a minute. And yeah, that's then off to getting the kids ready and getting them off to school.
Okay. What book are you currently reading or listening to?
Snow Crash.
Okay. Not heard of it. We'll check. What are your 3 indispensable tools for managing your business?
Slack, Zoom, Google Sheets.
Okay. What has been your best mistake to date? By that, I mean a setback that's given you the biggest feedback.
Oh, certainly losing money in 2018.
Okay.
It made 2020 a lot less stressful. I know a lot of co-found or a lot of founders, it was probably really stressful COVID, but for us, COVID was much easier than 2018 on us.
Interesting. If you could choose a single book or resource that's made the highest impact on how you view building a business and growth, which would it be?
100% go read it. The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham.
The Road Less Stupid. Okay. Garret, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the 2x e-commerce podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunle.
Cheers.
It was fun. It was a pleasure.
Cheers. And for those of you who want to check, Kindred Bravery out, it's kindredbravery.com. That's kindredbravely.com. Do you hang out on social? Are you a Twitter person, LinkedIn person, or do you just keep?
I do have a Twitter and a LinkedIn. You can find me at Geekerson or at GE Akerson.
Okay.
At either of those. Yeah.
Thank you, Garret.
Thanks, Kunle. It was fun.